You never really understand what isolation means until the world goes silent. I don't mean quiet. I mean silent, like the air itself has weight, like sound refuses to move. It happened 2 winters ago, in the northern Cascades of Washington. We went up there to get away, 4 of us. Me, my girlfriend Jenna, her brother Luke, and our old college friend Aaron. We'd all been burned out. Luke had just lost his job. Jenna was coming off a rough year at work. And Aaron, well, she just needed to disappear for a while. We rented a small mountain cabin on a site called Stillpine Lodge. One of those listings that boasted no neighbors for miles, as if that was a feature, not a warning. It was supposed to be a long weekend, 3 nights. It turned into the longest 72 hours of my life. Day 1, arrival. The drive up was rough. A snowstorm had rolled in early, covering the forest road in white dust. By the time we reached the cabin, the world had already started to close in. The place was charming in a rugged way. 2 bedrooms, 1 loft, stone fireplace, stocked pantry. No cell service, of course. The owner had left a CB radio for emergencies only. I remember Jenna laughing, saying it felt like we were in a movie. That first night was fine. We cooked, played cards, and drank wine while the storm picked up outside. The snow was coming down thick, but we didn't care. It was peaceful. The kind of quiet that city people mistake for tranquility. The kind that hides something else beneath it. Around midnight, Luke said he heard something. A voice. We were all half drunk, sitting by the fire. He'd gone to the window to smoke and just froze there, staring out into the white. "Someone's out there," he said. Jenna laughed. "It's probably the wind." But Luke didn't move. No, it sounded like someone saying my name. I got up to look, and sure enough, the snow outside was whipping sideways, the wind howling through the trees. But there was something strange about it. Every few gusts, I thought I heard a rhythm, like syllables. We joked about it until he finally came back to the couch, but Luke kept glancing toward the window the rest of the night. Day 2, the first tracks. By morning, we were snowed in. The road was completely buried. The drifts piled to the windows. The generator still worked, but the wind had dropped. Everything outside was still, too still. That's when Jenna noticed the tracks. They weren't animal prints, not the kind you expect up there. They looked like bare feet, human, leading from the tree line straight toward the cabin, and stopping at the edge of the porch. There were no return tracks. Luke swore it wasn't a prank, and Erin backed him up. She'd been up late reading, she said, and had heard soft, thumping noises outside around 3 a.m. We took turns looking from the window, everyone trying to rationalize it. Maybe melting patterns, wind distortion, snow collapse, whatever. But the shapes were too clear. Toes, arches, heels. Jenna tried to call for help, but of course, the phones were dead. I fired up the CB radio, but it just hissed. We told ourselves it was fine. Just weather. Just nerves. By afternoon, we were playing Monopoly to distract ourselves. Luke kept pacing. Erin started complaining about headaches and said she felt pressure in her ears, like altitude sickness. I tried to reassure everyone. Storms do weird things to the senses. You hear things, you see patterns. That night, though, that theory fell apart. Night 2, the whispering woods. I woke around 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps on the porch. At first, I thought it was Luke, maybe smoking again, but the steps were wrong. Slow, uneven, like something dragging one leg. Then came the voice, a woman's voice, faint through the howling wind. It said my name, once, then again. I froze. Jenna was asleep beside me, breathing softly. I leaned toward the window and saw only snow, swirling under the moonlight. Then, through the storm, I saw a figure at the edge of the tree line, too far to make out, but it looked like a woman, her hair whipping in the wind, wearing something light, maybe a dress, no coat, barefoot. She lifted her arm and pointed, not at the cabin, but at me. I remember my pulse hammering, my chest tight. Then the light flickered. When it steadied again, she was gone. I must have woken Jenna because she stirred and mumbled, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied. "Just the storm." But I didn't sleep after that. Day 3. The storm breaks. Morning came gray and heavy. The storm had stopped, but the silence was unbearable. Erin was gone. Her coat was missing, but her boots were still by the door. The front door itself was open, half buried in snow. Luke ran outside shouting her name, but the forest swallowed every sound. We followed her footprints, bare feet again, this time smaller, leading away from the porch, winding through the snowdrifts toward the trees. Then they just stopped, like she'd been lifted straight off the ground. Luke started losing it, yelling, accusing me of not locking the door. Jenna tried to calm him, but she was shaking too. We spent hours calling, searching, freezing, until Jenna screamed. She'd found Erin's scarf, hanging from a branch, tied neatly like a marker. Underneath it, carved into the tree bark, were words, "You shouldn't have crossed the Snowline." Luke swore it was a prank. I wanted to believe that too. But then we heard it again, the voice. Not far this time. It was Erin, calling for help. The voices. We followed the sound through the woods, tripping through drifts up to our knees. Every few seconds, we'd hear her. "Luke, Mark, over here." But the voice kept moving, pulling us deeper into the trees. I remember shouting, "Erin, stay where you are," but she never answered directly. It was like she could hear us, but wasn't really there. Finally, the forest opened into a small clearing, a frozen pond. And on the far side stood Erin. At least, that's what I thought. She was facing away, her hair plastered with snow, her body shivering violently. I started toward her, but Jenna grabbed my arm. "Her feet," she whispered. They were bare, buried in the snow, and her skin wasn't right, too gray, too still. Then she turned around. Her eyes were white, not blind white, but reflective, like ice catching the light. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then, in a voice that wasn't hers, deep and layered, we heard, "You brought the warmth. We keep what crosses the line." She took one step forward, then another, and the ice under her feet cracked. The sound echoed across the clearing. Luke screamed her name and ran, but before he reached her, she fell through. He hit the ice a second later, smashing it with his fists, yelling. But there was no trace of her beneath. No movement, no bubbles, no body. Just black water. Jenna and I pulled him back, half dragging him through the snow as he sobbed. The whispers followed us the entire way back to the cabin. Sometimes behind us, sometimes ahead. The things in the walls. That night, none of us slept. The generator sputtered, lights flickering in and out. Luke sat in the corner, staring at the fire. Jenna wouldn't talk. She just kept watching the window. At one point, around 4 a.m., the walls began to creak, not from wind, but from inside, like something was moving within them. You could hear faint knocks, dragging sounds, and every few minutes, voices, dozens of them, murmuring, like people whispering in another room. Luke snapped first. He grabbed an axe from the woodpile and started hacking at the wall. Splinters flew everywhere, insulation spilling out. "Do you hear them?" he shouted. "They're right there. They're inside." We managed to pull him back, but behind the shredded wood, there was something. A hollow cavity filled with frozen air and something else. A smell like rot and metal. Inside the gap, carved deep into the beam, were symbols. circles with vertical lines through them, repeating like a warning. And words, "Stay below the line." That's when I realized something. Every window in the cabin had frost built up halfway, a solid layer at the exact same height. The snowline. Everything above it was clear. Everything below, frozen solid, opaque white. Like the frost itself was keeping something out, or in. The break. By morning, Luke was gone, door wide open again. This time, no tracks. Just the shape of his boots sitting neatly on the porch, filled with snow. Jenna broke down. I tried the CB again, screaming for help, but only static came through. Except for a moment, it wasn't static. It was a voice. Aaron's voice, whispering, "Mark, come down to the pond." The cabin door slammed shut on its own. I swear it. The lights went out, and something started moving down the hallway. Slow, scraping against the walls. The smell of iron and cold filled the air. Jenna grabbed my arm and whispered, "We have to go." We bolted out the back door into the snow. The world was gray, blindingly bright. No wind, no sound, just stillness. The pond wasn't far. We could see it through the trees. And there, standing on the ice, were three figures. Luke, Aaron, and something else between them. Tall, featureless, black against the white. Its arms too long, its head tilted like it was listening. They all turned toward us in perfect sync. Then the whispers started again. Not voices this time, but layers of us. Our own words from earlier, laughing, talking, arguing, echoed back. Jenna screamed and ran. I followed, not daring to look back. We ran until we reached the road, snow up to our waists. I don't remember falling, but when I opened my eyes again, it was morning, and I was lying in the bed of a snowplow. They told me I'd been found wandering the road barefoot, hypothermic, mumbling about voices under the snow. Jenna wasn't with me. They never found her. They say I was in shock. Frostbite, trauma, dehydration. The rescue team went up to Stillpine Lodge a week later. The cabin was gone, completely buried, they said. The entire slope had collapsed in the blizzard. They never recovered anything. But here's the part I can't explain. When they showed me photos of the site, there was a clear line across every tree trunk, every boulder, a pale, icy band about 4 feet high, like the forest had frozen itself at that height. The snowline. Sometimes, when it snows heavy enough here in town, I hear it again, a faint whisper, just outside my window. A woman's voice, Jenna's, and every time, the frost on my window stops halfway up. Perfectly even, the same height as before. I haven't gone outside in the snow since. It's been 6 months since the mountain. 6 months since they found me barefoot on the highway, frostbitten and delirious, whispering about voices in the snow. I've told myself 1,000 times it wasn't real, that hypothermia does things to the brain, that the whispers, the figures, the frozen pond were hallucinations. But lately, things have started happening again. It started small, a chill in the air that never goes away, frost creeping up my windows, no matter how warm I keep the apartment, and always stopping perfectly halfway. The snowline, the therapy sessions. After the rescue, they made me see a trauma therapist. Her name's Dr. Weller. Patient, calm, kind in that clinical way people are when they don't believe you. I told her everything, about Aaron, about Luke, about Jenna falling behind in the storm. She wrote a lot, nodded a lot, and finally said, "Mike, isolation trauma can cause auditory hallucinations. You weren't hearing voices. Your brain was trying to process grief." I wanted to believe her. For months, I did. I forced myself to move on. New job, new apartment, new state. But there's one thing I can't explain. Every session, when I sit in her office, I can see the frost creeping up her window too. Same height, every time. The package, 2 weeks ago, A package arrived on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a small envelope, yellowed and damp, with my name written in Jenna's handwriting. I almost dropped it. I hadn't seen her writing since before the trip. The postmark was smudged, but the date, January 9th, was impossible. That was the day she disappeared. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed the cabin, or what was left of it. Snow-covered, leaning sideways, half buried in the drifts. And standing in front of it, blurred but visible, was someone holding the camera. A dark figure, tall, arms too long. Scrawled across the bottom in shaky ink were 4 words. Below the line, Mark. I took it to the police. They dismissed it as a cruel prank. But how would anyone know those words? That night, the frost on my window crept higher than usual. When I woke, it was at eye level. The call. A few days later, I woke to my phone ringing at 3:12 a.m. Unknown number. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. There was static at first, then a woman's voice, faint, distant, but clear enough to freeze my blood. Mark, it's so cold here. It was Jenna. I said her name over and over, asking where she was. The static grew louder, but underneath it, I could hear something else, like wind, then whispers. Hundreds of them, repeating, cross back, below the line. Then the call ended. The phone showed no record of it ever happening. The return. I know what you're thinking. Why go back? Because when the nightmares follow you, even when you're awake, you start to realize the only way out is through. Last weekend, I drove north again. I told myself it was for closure. I told Dr. Weller I was visiting a friend. The road was closed past mile marker 27, so I parked and walked the rest of the way through knee-deep snow. The forest was silent again, the same thick, choking quiet. When I reached the clearing, I stopped. The cabin was gone, but the pond was still there, frozen solid, flat as glass. Someone had carved words into the ice, freshly. She's still below. I dropped to my knees, pressed my ear against the ice. Nothing. No sound. Just the cold, deep and endless. Then faintly from below, a single knock. 3 seconds later, another. Then so softly I almost didn't hear it. Mark, help me. I backed away, heart hammering. My breath fogged the air. The frost began forming around the edges of the pond, spreading like veins, crawling outward toward me. And then, through the fog, I saw her. Jenna, standing beneath the ice, eyes open, mouth moving, hair drifting around her face like smoke. She was mouthing something, again and again. Below, below, below. The ice cracked. I ran. I don't remember how long or where, just running through the snow, the whispers chasing me, my name echoing through the trees. When I finally reached my car, my keys were already in the ignition. The frost on the windshield stopped halfway up. The home. I haven't slept since. The frost line appears on every surface now. The mirror, the TV screen, the glass on picture frames. Sometimes when I breathe near it, the ice melts just enough to reveal something behind it. Faces, blurred and moving. Aaron's, Luke's, Jenna's. Whispering, waiting. 2 nights ago, the frost started spreading across my bedroom floor. It stopped halfway between the bed and the door. A perfect, even border. The air beyond it feels heavier, colder. When I drop things across that line, they vanish into the frost for a second before reappearing on my side. Like there's another space just beneath the surface. Last night, I heard footsteps, slow, dragging, just outside the bedroom. Then a voice, Jenna's again, but wrong, echoing from under the floorboards. It's warm up there. Come below, Mark. I don't think she's lying. I think she's there, and she wants me to join her. The final entry. It's snowing again tonight. Heavy, silent, the way it was before. There's frost on the window, reaching higher this time, nearly to the ceiling. Something's tapping on the glass. I can see a shape in the reflection, standing behind me, tall and still. I don't want to turn around, but I can hear breathing. Slow, steady, not mine. And beneath it all, that same layered voice, you brought the warmth. I can see my breath now, even though the heat's on full. The frost is climbing the walls, curling around the outlets, the bedposts, my shoes. It's at my knees now. I think I understand it. What below the line really means. It isn't just a boundary, it's a door, and it's opening. If anyone finds this, don't come looking for me. If you see the frost, stop halfway up your window. Don't touch it, don't listen. Because once you cross the snow line, you don't come back. You just keep whispering. Preface: Missing Person Report. Subject: Mark Hanlon. Date of disappearance: February 4th, 2024. Location: Seattle, Washington. Details: found apartment frozen from within. Windows shattered. Thick frost covering walls and floor. Thermostat set to 74 degrees Fahrenheit. No sign of struggle, but all interior surfaces displayed a consistent horizontal ice band, approximately 48 inches high. Hanlon's vehicle was found parked near I-90. Inside, an old camera, a digital recorder, and a notebook sealed in plastic. This file contains transcribed excerpts for record keeping and analysis. Audio file 1 found on Hanlon's recorder. Timestamp 2:02:24, 11:48 p.m. Sound of breathing, faint wind. It's spreading again. The frost. It's higher tonight. I tried scraping it off, but it just comes back thicker. Pauses. I hear them under the floor now, like voices in the pipes. Jenna keeps saying my name. Soft laugh. I'm recording this in case it happens again. If I stop talking, that means I've crossed it. Static. Muffled voice. Indistinct female whisper. Possibly below. File ends abruptly. Investigator note: no sign of Jenna. Surname unknown or her remains were ever found in the 2023 Still Pine avalanche recovery. Voice pattern in audio resembles the subject's own, but at a slower frequency, like slowed playback. Notebook entry number 17. Handwritten, recovered intact. They said the pond froze over, but that's not true. The ice wasn't solid. It was thin as skin. You could see things moving beneath it, like shadows under glass. The snowline isn't just ice. It's a border between air that remembers and air that forgets. I think the people who vanish don't die. They're just beneath it now. The cold isn't killing them. It's keeping them. The page ends mid-sentence. The next 3 pages are blank, except for faint, circular water stains that later tested as frozen condensation. Email extract from Mark Hanlon to Dr. L. Weller. Sent, date 21st, 24, 2:13 a.m. Subject: it's climbing again. You said trauma makes patterns out of chaos. But what if the pattern is real? I measured it. 4 feet every time. Windows, walls, mirrors, perfectly level. Last night, it reached the ceiling. When I woke up, it had reset. Do you think memory can freeze? Message undeliverable. Email never left drafts folder. Field Journal Investigator Dana Rowe, 2/10/24. I was assigned this case after the coroner ruled unexplained disappearance. The apartment was sealed, but I got temporary clearance. The frost still hasn't melted, even with the power restored. The ice band is real, perfectly straight. Feels like standing inside a freezer with the hum turned off. Temperature readings show -4 degrees Celsius below the line, 21 degrees Celsius above it. That shouldn't be possible. 2/13/24. I found a second recorder under the bed. Fresh batteries, but the last timestamp matches the night he vanished. When I played it, there was nothing but static at first. Then a voice that said my name. My name. I hadn't even started this case then. U1224. Every surface I touch leaves condensation that freezes within seconds. The techs think it's moisture reacting to air pressure. I think it's something else. I can hear faint knocking from under the floorboards, slow, spaced apart, like someone tapping ice with their fingernails. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 again. I measured from the ground up. The frost line here is 5 inches higher than at the original site. It's spreading. Audio file 2. Recovered from investigator's body camera. Timestamp 02/13/24, 9:27 p.m. Door creaks open. Footsteps crunching over frost. Dana, okay Mark, if this is some kind of elaborate trick. Pause. Faint whispering begins. Dana, who's there? Soft overlapping voices repeating below. Dana, sound is coming from under the bed frame. Jesus, it's freezing in here. Thud, a loud crack like ice splitting. There's something under the... Audio cuts out. Camera recovered 16 hours later. Lens frost pattern consistent with known Snowline band. Incident report. Seattle Police. Officer statement. Apartment 4C reported heavy frost buildup. Upon forced entry, investigators found walls and furniture coated in 1-inch ice. All electronics shorted. At 48 inches from the ground, a continuous horizontal frost seam encircled every surface. No body recovered. However, thermal imaging detected faint movement beneath the floorboards before the power failed. Unsigned letter. Received at Search and Rescue HQ, no return address. Stop sending people to Stillpine. The frost is moving south. It follows warmth. Heaters, lights, breath. Once it touches your shadow, it remembers you. Stay above the line. The letter was written on paper, partially frozen through, with the same handwriting as Mark Hanlon's notebook. Internal email, Washington State Emergency Management, from D. Rowe, account active, to WSEMA Command, subject, RE, containment protocol, date, 02/16/24, 3:02 a.m. You can't contain what remembers warmth. Close the highways. Tell them not to touch the frost. Message sent 3 days after Dana Rowe's disappearance. Audio file 3. Final. Unidentified source. Wind howling faintly. A chorus of layered whispers. Male, female, indistinct. Below. 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 Long pause. A single voice, clearer now. Male matching Hanlon's pattern. You hear us now, don't you? Static builds, then cuts out. End of file. Case status, still open. All evidence sealed under federal containment order. In the weeks following retrieval, frost was observed forming in the evidence locker despite temperature control. It stopped halfway up the door. Current containment level unstable. I've never told anyone the full story of what happened at Stillwell Ridge. People think they know, that it was just an accident, a blizzard, a case of bad luck in the mountains. But the truth is, if I start talking about it, people look at me like I've lost my mind. And maybe I have. All I know is that I still hear them sometimes. The voices, when the wind hits the right pitch against my window. And every time winter rolls around, I start to feel the cold settle in a way that doesn't belong in any forecast. So, I'm writing this down for whoever needs to hear it. For anyone who thinks about renting a cabin up by Stillwell Ridge, near the state line, about 100 miles from the nearest real town. Don't. Whatever's in those woods, it doesn't stop at the tree line. It follows the snow. The cabin. There were 5 of us. Me, Jenna, my girlfriend at the time, my best friend Luke, and his younger sister Erin, plus a guy from work named Rob who tagged along last minute. We'd all needed a break. Jenna especially. She'd been working night shifts at the hospital, barely sleeping. I'd found the cabin online through some listing site. It looked perfect. Isolated, scenic, perched on a ridge overlooking a frozen lake. The kind of place you could imagine hearing nothing but the fire crackling and the sound of your own heartbeat. We left the city on a Thursday morning in January. By the time we reached the last stretch of mountain road, snow had already started falling. The GPS lost signal about 20 minutes before we saw the first sign for Stillwell Ridge. It wasn't really a sign, more like a half-rotted plank nailed to a tree. When we finally reached the cabin, it was nearly dark. The snow was thick enough that it muted everything. Our voices, the car engine, even the crunch of boots on gravel. The cabin was bigger than I'd expected. 2 stories, wraparound porch, and smoke-blackened stone chimney. There was something about it that felt unlived in, like it had been waiting for us. The first night. We spent the first night unpacking and joking about how we were going to survive. The weekend without Wi-Fi. Luke lit the fireplace. The flames caught easily, too easily, given how damp the wood pile outside looked. Inside, the walls were lined with old photographs, black and white shots of the ridge, hunters, frozen lakes, and groups of people standing stiffly in the snow. In one of them, there was something off. The shadows behind the people were wrong. Too long, too thin. I didn't mention it to anyone. By midnight, the snow outside was piling up fast. We played cards, drank whiskey, and told ghost stories, like we were trying to tempt something out of the dark. At some point, Rob said, "You ever notice how quiet it gets when snow's this heavy? Like the world just stops listening?" I thought he was drunk, but I remember that line now, because it was exactly what it felt like later. Like the world stopped listening. Whispers. The next morning, the storm had fully closed in. We were snowed in, couldn't even see the end of the driveway. Luke was the first to hear it. He was standing by the window, looking out at the tree line, when he said, "Someone's out there." I joined him. Nothing. Just white snow and the black line of pines. He frowned. I heard someone calling my name. We brushed it off. Cabin fever, wind, imagination, whatever. But that night, I heard it too. It was faint, somewhere beyond the porch. A voice saying my name. Not yelling, just speaking. Calm, familiar. David. I froze. It wasn't Luke or Rob. Both were asleep. Jenna was in bed beside me, but the voice sounded exactly like my brother Mark, who died 5 years earlier. I went to the window. The snow had stopped, and the moon lit the forest in cold silver light. Nothing moved out there, but the sound came again, closer this time. "David, you left me." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Something in the woods. By the third day, tensions were high. The snow hadn't let up, and we were running low on food. Erin swore she saw someone standing by the tree line at dawn. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like a parka. When we went outside, there were no footprints, just smooth, untouched snow. That's when we found the first sign. Right by the edge of the woods, half buried in the drift, was a wooden post, old, splintered, carved with something that looked like a name. We brushed it off. It said, "Below the Snowline." Luke thought it was some old hiker's marker, but Jenna wouldn't go near it. She said it felt wrong, like the air got heavier around it. That night, the whispers came for everyone. We heard our own names in the voices of people we knew. Family, exes, even people who'd passed away. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they cried, sometimes they just asked to be let in. Rob lost it first. He started pacing the living room with an axe we'd found. When we woke up the next morning, Rob was gone. The front door stood open, snow pouring in across the floor. Outside, Only one set of footprints, his leading straight into the woods. Half a mile later, they just stopped, like he'd stepped off the world. Below the snowline, we tried calling for help. Nothing. Phones were dead, radio static. On the fourth night, Luke said he was going to hike down the ridge to the ranger station. He never made it. I followed his tracks the next morning until I reached the same place where Rob's had vanished. And there, just beyond the last footprint, was a shape in the snow, like someone had been lying down, face first, and then melted into the ice. Except the shape was wrong, stretched, longer than it should have been. And I swear I saw something moving beneath the frozen surface, just for a second. When I got back to the cabin, Erin was sitting by the fire, staring in the window. She said she saw Luke outside. He was calling for her to open the door, saying he was hurt. But she knew it wasn't him, because his voice was coming from the woods and from the chimney at the same time. That night, Jenna started talking in her sleep, whispering, repeating the same phrase over and over. Below the snowline, below the snowline. The descent. By day 6, Erin was gone too. No sign of struggle, just her coat missing and the front door open again. Jenna wouldn't speak. She just sat near the fire, staring at the shadows on the wall, whispering to someone who wasn't there. I tried to keep her awake, but at some point, she looked up at me and said something I'll never forget. It's warmer below the snowline. That's where they wait. The storm broke that night. The sky cleared, and the moon was bright enough to turn everything blue-white. I thought maybe, finally, I could leave. But when I stepped outside, I realized the snow wasn't untouched anymore. There were shapes in it, long trails like something had crawled up from underneath. And near the tree line, something stood. Tall, thin, its limbs too long for its frame. Its skin, or whatever passed for it, pale as snow. When it moved, the sound was like ice cracking on a lake. I ran back inside. Jenna was gone. The last night, I don't remember falling asleep. I remember waking to the sound of voices all around the cabin. Every one of them was someone I knew. My brother Luke, Jenna, even my mother. They were calling to me, saying they were cold, saying they needed help. I looked outside. The forest was full of figures, half glimpsed between the trees. Not people, echoes. Each face was blurred, flickering like static. Each voice layered over the other, like wind through broken glass. And then they all said it at once. Come below the snowline. Something hit the roof, then the walls, then the windows. I don't remember much after that, just light and cold, and a sound like the earth opening. They found me 2 days later, half frozen, about a mile down the ridge. No sign of the others. The cabin had collapsed under the snow. The police said it was an avalanche. But when they showed me photos of the site, I noticed something. Under the broken beams and drifted snow, there were marks, long, narrow grooves in the ice leading upward from below. No one ever found the bodies. No one believed the part about the voices. But when they brought me down the mountain, the ranger who drove me asked something that's never left me. He said, "You saw it too, didn't you? The line in the snow where the forest ends and something else begins." I didn't answer. That was 3 years ago. Every winter since, I've moved further south, trying to outrun it. But it doesn't matter. Last week, I woke up to frost crawling along my window from the inside. And last night, when I turned off the lights, I heard my brother's voice again. "David, it's warmer below the snowline." I don't think it's tied to the cabin anymore. I think once you hear it, you're part of it. And when the first snow falls this year, I think I'll go outside, just to see how far down it goes. I thought I'd escaped the snow. After what happened at Stillwell Ridge, I swore I'd never set foot in another mountain town again. For months, I couldn't even look at a weather forecast without feeling my throat tighten. I moved south, closer to the coast, somewhere warm, somewhere green. But warmth doesn't fix what's inside you. It just delays the freeze. 6 months later, my savings ran out. I needed work. And when a company called Northline Forestry offered me a short-term logistics job, remote outpost, 6 weeks, good pay, I told myself it was just work. A different mountain, different snow. I told myself the thing at Stillwell Ridge was gone. I was wrong. Arrival. They flew me into a small regional airport in northern Idaho. From there, it was a 2-hour drive in a company truck up winding logging roads to the operations base. It wasn't a cabin this time. It was a prefabricated structure, part office, part bunkhouse, sitting on a plateau surrounded by spruce forest and silent hills. A dozen workers were stationed there, overseeing timber survey routes and environmental sensors. I remember thinking it felt safe, functional, like civilization had finally caught up with me. But the first night I saw the snow. It wasn't even supposed to snow that early in the season. But around midnight, flakes started falling, sparse at first, then heavier, until the floodlights outside turned into white clouds. The workers cheered. They said it was a good omen for the ski season. I tried to laugh with them, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I went to bed, telling myself it was just weather. But around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in months. The wind, and under it, voices. Faint, like they were being carried across miles of cold air. David. I sat up, heart pounding. The dorm window was fogged. Frost creeping inward from the corners. I told myself it was the radio. The guys in the other room sometimes left it on low overnight. But the next morning, when I asked, nobody had used the radio. They just looked at me funny and said, "You must have heard the wind. It does that sometimes up here." Yeah, I'd heard that before. Echo Ridge. A week into the job, I started to relax a little. The rhythm helped. Early mornings, data runs, radio check-ins, inventory reports. My supervisor was a woman named Karen, mid-40s, pragmatic, the kind of person who'd seen too many winters to romanticize them. She told me I'd be working the northern outpost, a small relay cabin about 5 miles up the service road. It was supposed to be temporary housing while I monitored equipment logs. I didn't want to go, but I needed the money, and I needed to believe I wasn't crazy. The cabin was small but clean. Solar lights, radio, emergency generator. No old photographs, no hunting trophies. Just a desk, a cot, and the sound of the wind. The second night there, the radio crackled around midnight. Static at first, then a voice breaking through. Faint, familiar. "You shouldn't have come back up." I froze. The voice was Luke's. I turned the radio off, pulled the batteries out, sat in silence for the rest of the night. The tracks 3 days later, I woke to find the snow around the cabin disturbed. Not animal prints, not boot marks. They were too long, too narrow, almost like drag marks. They led from the tree line right up to the porch steps, then stopped, like something had stood there, watching. I reported it to base. Karen sent a snowmobile patrol. They saw nothing. But that night, one of the field techs, a kid named Mason, came by to check the satellite line. He told me something odd. "We saw tracks like that last year," he said, "after a blizzard. Looked human, but off. My partner said it's just ice melt, optical illusion." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You ever hear about the Stillwell incident? I nearly dropped my coffee. What did you say? Stillwell Ridge, up north. Whole group vanished in a cabin last winter. They said it was an avalanche, but some of the rangers think it wasn't. He lowered his voice. They say there's a line up there, a place where the snow changes color when you cross it. My granddad called it the Snowline. I didn't answer. I just stared out the window at the trees and wondered if the cold under my skin was from memory or from something moving closer. Static. By the end of week 2, my dreams had come back. Always the same. White sky, endless snow, and faint figures moving beneath the surface. Sometimes I saw faces pressed against the ice. Sometimes I saw Jenna, her lips blue, her eyes wide, whispering words I couldn't hear. During the day, I started catching sounds in the radio again. Not static, patterns. Faint voices threaded through the white noise, repeating fragments. Sometimes they called my name, sometimes they used others. And once, I swear, one of them said, "It's warmer below the snowline." I turned the radio off for good after that. But that didn't stop the sounds. They came from the wind, from the creaks in the beams, from the space beneath the floor. One night, I woke to find frost crawling along the walls, not forming randomly, but spelling words. I scraped the ice away with my hand and read what it said. "Stay below." Mason was the next to go. He'd radioed me the morning before, saying he'd heard something strange near his relay site. Laughter echoing through the trees. When I drove out there, his snowmobile was still running, lights cutting through the fog, but Mason was gone. I found his footprints leading toward the ridge. They stopped at a drift, and just like before, just like Stillwell, there was a depression in the snow, the outline of a body, melted deeper than it should have been. When I returned to base to report it, Karen called the Rangers. They said the storm made a search impossible until morning. That night, everyone slept in shifts, and around 3 a.m., the radio in the common room came on by itself. Static first, then Mason's voice. "It's okay, I'm below now, you should come see." The White Forest. The next day, the storm cleared for the first time in weeks. I volunteered to stay at the outpost cabin again. Part of me needed to see it through, to prove to myself that whatever had happened before wasn't happening again. But when I returned that evening, something was wrong. The air felt heavier, muted. The horizon, the place where the forest met the snow, looked wrong. Like the world had been drawn in 2 layers, slightly misaligned. As the sun set, I saw shapes standing at the edge of the trees. Tall, thin, motionless. Not shadows, not tricks of light. Figures. I shut off the generator and sat in the dark, breathing shallowly, trying to make no sound. But through the walls, I could hear them moving. Not walking, sliding. And beneath it all, a low hum, deep and steady, like the earth itself was vibrating. I realized it wasn't sound. It was a feeling, in my ribs, my teeth, my skull. Then the whisper came, right beside my ear. "You came back to us." The collapse. At dawn, the snow had buried half the cabin. I packed what I could and started down the trail, heading for the main base. Halfway there, I saw something gleaming in the snow, a wooden post, half buried. Old, splintered. Carved into it were the same words I'd seen at Stillwell Ridge, "Below the snowline." I ran, but the further I went, the quieter the world became. The wind stopped. Even my footsteps didn't make sound. And then, faintly, ahead of me on the trail, I saw someone. Jenna. Her hair matted with frost, her parka torn, her eyes black with ice. She was smiling. "You don't have to run anymore," she said. "It's so warm below." When I blinked, she was gone. But her footprints stayed, and they led not down the trail, but up toward the ridge, the return. I don't remember reaching the base. The others said they found me stumbling out of the trees at dusk, incoherent, covered in frostbite. They airlifted me out the next morning. The relay cabin, gone. Collapsed like the one at Stillwell Ridge. They said it was structural failure due to snow load. That's what they always say. I spent 2 weeks in recovery. The doctors told me I had hypothermia, hallucinations, trauma-related flashbacks. Maybe they're right. Maybe all of it lives only in my head. But last night, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph, black and white, grainy. It showed a group of workers standing in front of the outpost. Behind them, in the tree line, was a row of tall, pale figures. And at the bottom, written in shaky ink, the Snowline moves south every year. It's November now. They say it'll be a mild winter. But this morning, when I stepped outside, there was frost on the windshield and a set of long, narrow marks in the yard. I live hundreds of miles from the nearest mountain, but the air feels heavier again. The silence has returned. And sometimes, just before dawn, I swear I hear someone outside my window, not knocking, not shouting, just whispering, "David, it's time to come below." It's been 8 months since Stillwell Ridge. 8 months since I watched the snow swallow my friends, and since I heard voices that weren't supposed to exist. I moved 200 miles south to a quiet town called Briar Hollow, tucked into another range of mountains. Population just under 3,000. The kind of place that still closes early on Sundays. When I arrived in June, everything was green. The mountains were bright with pine and whetstone. I told myself it would be different here, that whatever haunted me had been a trick of isolation and weather. I took a maintenance job at Pinecrest Lodge, a resort that draws hikers and ski tourists when the season hits. Summers are slow, but they give you a small cabin out back and a steady paycheck. For the first time since the ridge, I could sleep through the night. Or almost. Sometimes, around 3 a.m., I'd wake up with the feeling that someone had just whispered in my ear. Not words exactly, just breath. Cold breath. I'd turn on the lamp, check the heater, check the door. Always locked. Always nothing. By late October, the first flakes fell. Everyone said it was early, but no one complained. The town survives on snow. I remember the first night the plows came out, orange lights flashing through the mist. I stood at my window, watching the drifts rise along the lodge road. And then, for a split second, I thought I saw someone standing beyond the fence line, just past the snowlight. A dark figure, too still for too long. I blinked, and it was gone. The second storm. 2 weeks later, the storm warnings turned red. We were told to stay put. The pass had been closed. I helped board up the windows in the old north wing of the lodge, an unused section that creaks when the wind hits. That night, I heard it again, the whisper. Only this time it had shape. "David." I froze. The room was empty, except for the sound of snow hitting the glass. But it wasn't the voice that scared me. It was the tone. It sounded like Mark, my friend from Stillwell Ridge, the one who never came back. I told myself I was exhausted, that I'd been carrying guilt for months, and that guilt had a way of talking back. But when I stepped outside to clear my head, I saw something strange in the snow. A perfect line of prints leading from the tree line to the lodge, and stopping right beneath my window. Bare footprints. And next morning, the wind erased them. Life shrinks. By mid-November, Briar Hollow was cut off. The main road collapsed under an avalanche, and the backup route was frozen solid. Town Hall sent out notices. Conserve food. Check on your neighbors. The snow didn't stop. It came in waves, heavier each day. Roofs cracked under the weight. Power lines sagged like wet ropes. Inside Pinecrest Lodge, we were down to 6 staff members. The owner left a week earlier to find help, but no one heard from her again. At night, we gathered in the main hall around a gas heater. Everyone heard things by then. Knocking on doors, footsteps in the attic, whispers outside the windows. One of the cooks, Angela, swore she saw a figure standing in the courtyard, whispering her name. She packed a bag the next morning and tried to leave on foot. We found her tracks about half a mile down the service road. They stopped suddenly, as if she'd walked off into the air. The north wing. The noises from the boarded wing grew louder. Sometimes it sounded like a door slamming. Other times it was just breathing, soft and steady. One evening, I went to check. The hallway beyond the boards was coated in frost. My flashlight caught something carved into the ice on one of the walls. Under the snowline, the same words I saw back at Stillwell Ridge. That's when I realized it wasn't the mountain that was haunted. It was the line itself, the place where warmth gives way to freezing silence. And it was moving south. The collapse. In early December, the lodge generator died. We lit candles and tried to stay calm, but people started acting strange. One of the maintenance guys, Jared, kept standing by the windows at night, talking under his breath. When I asked who he was talking to, he said, "They're just waiting for the cold to take us. It's easier if you don't fight it." That night, he disappeared. I found his boots by the back door, still warm. By then, I'd stopped sleeping. I kept hearing multiple voices whispering from the forest. Sometimes they used my friends' names, sometimes my own. I started writing everything down in this notebook, the one you're reading. I told myself that if anyone finds it, they'll know what happened here. The town below. Last week, the radio picked up a weak signal from Briar Hollow. A voice kept repeating, white silence, over and over. I hiked down the ridge to check the town myself. The streets were buried to the rooftops. Cars sat half swallowed in snow. Doors swung open into empty houses. But the strangest part was the frost. It wasn't random. It grew in spirals, like writing. When I brushed it off one window, I saw letters forming underneath. "Hello, David." That's when I heard the whisper right behind me, close enough to fog the glass. I ran, the last entry. I don't know how long I've been up here now. Maybe days, maybe weeks. The sky doesn't change. The snowline keeps climbing. The lodge is almost buried. Only the top floor is still visible above the drift. Every night, I hear footsteps on the roof. Sometimes laughter. Sometimes the same breathless voice saying, "Come back inside. It's warmer here." But I know what happens if I do. I'm leaving this notebook on the highest windowsill before I go. If you find it, if the snow hasn't swallowed everything, remember this: it doesn't live in the mountains. It is the mountains. And once it crosses the snow line, it doesn't leave. The last thing I see now are shapes moving in the storm. They're calling my name. It sounds almost kind. The page ends there. A weather service report, dated 2 weeks later, notes that Briar Hollow was found abandoned after a record snowfall. No human remains were recovered. The snow line had advanced 15 miles farther south.